As you may have been able to figure out in the last 3 segments, I'm a big fan of villains. I mean, yeah, the heroes are the focus characters and usually are the ones you're supposed to like the most, but there are those occasions where the villains just end up stealing the show. BlazBlue, Kid Icarus, and Crash Bandicoot are all prominent examples of this for me, as you already saw, and now we're going to talk about another example of this situation, but this time we're going to need someone a little more fabulous. Out of all the characters in the Legend of Zelda series, villain or otherwise, Girahim has always stood out the most for me, and he was one of the biggest reasons behind my enjoyment of Skyward Sword. Well, him and Groose. So what makes Girahim such a great character in my eyes? Well, there's a multitude of reasons, but let's start with his personality. To put it simply, Girahim is such a ham! Seriously, this guy loves to be as over-the-top and theatrical as possible whenever he gets the chance, which I absolutely love. It's a nice change of pace from other Zelda villains, even from the other one present in the same game. Beyond that, he's also quite flamboyant, and even pretty polite at some points. But at the same time, Girahim has a much darker side, which is composed of traits like arrogance, lunacy, and even a sense of sadism. He's got a lot going for him, that's what I find so enjoyable about him. Then there's his role in the story. Admittedly, it's a little disappointing that the role of main villain is taken from him by Demise, one of the least interesting villains in the Zelda series, but Girahim's given a lot of screen time, so that makes up for it. Especially since he's got a lot of memorable moments, including his introduction, where he embraces his inner Gene Simmons, his majestic dance during his ritual, and the final duel against him where he finally snaps and shows his true colors, both figuratively and literally. Yeah, it's pretty obvious why Girahim became a fan favorite among the Zelda fanbase, and because of his reputation, he managed to find himself a spot in Hyrule Warriors' roster. And yes, he's my favorite character to use in the game. The only thing that would be better than being playable in Hyrule Warriors is if he made it into the roster of Super Smash Bros. 4. Maybe he'll make it in as DLC. Oh, wait, he's an assist trophy already. Why do you do this to me, Sakurai? Oh, hey, Dust Elysian Tale, that game I talked about for a long time in my Games I Played in 2014 list. It's like I like it or something. But since I've already done a segment on it before, I'm not going to talk about how awesome Dust is. Instead, I'm going to talk about how awesome Dust is. Okay, let me try that again. I'm going to talk about the game's protagonist, who's also named Dust. There's quite a lot I like about this mysterious warrior, but let's start with his fighting style. Dust wields the mystical blade of Ara, which he can use efficiently in combat right from the start of the game. He's very agile in battle, allowing him to swing Ara around quickly and easily, even in mid-air, allowing him to perform some swift combos. He also has the ability to create a powerful air vacuum with Ara, which can also be combined with Fidget's magic to unleash insane magic attacks. His abilities with the sword really make Dust Elysian Tale a lot of fun to play. But besides his fighting attributes, I also really like his character. At the start of the game, Dust suffers from everyone's favorite plot device, amnesia. Because of this, Dust comes off as very shy, finding himself uncomfortable when talking with others. That being said, he still has strong charisma, and he contains a strong sense of what's right and wrong. But what's really interesting about Dust is his backstory and how it affects him currently. And yes, I will be spoiling Dust. The reason Dust has amnesia is because he's actually a fusion of 2 souls. One of these souls was Cassius, an assassin and ally to the game's villain, General Gaius. Cassius was a master in the art of swordplay, but had no sense of humanity within him. The other soul belonged to Jin, a young, pure-hearted boy who had no skills in battle, but still tried to fight off Cassius when he and General Gaius' soldiers destroyed Jin's home village. Constantly throughout the game, Dust feels himself in conflict between these 2 souls in his actions and attitude, as if Jin and Cassius are both fighting for control over Dust. It really does help make Dust that much more of an interesting character, or at least for me. I really love seeing Dust go through his journey of identity, so it was pretty upsetting when the game finally came to an end. Fortunately, game creator Dean Dodrill has said he plans to make a sequel in the future, so I can't wait to see what he has in store for this incredible character. Unless he pulls a Phil Fish on us all.
You know what? I'm canceling Fizz too!
Well, this guy looks familiar. Yep, it's time to talk about Owain again. I know I talked about him a lot in my previous list, so for your sake, I'll try and make this quick and simple. Owain is the son of Lissa, my favorite female unit in Fire Emblem Awakening, and is one of the warriors who went back in time with Lucina to save the future. So what makes me like him more than the rest of the game's cast? Well, his personality, for one. Owain is essentially the game's equivalent to a dramatic anime or video game protagonist. He's over the top, speaks in an overly theatrical fashion, and shouts the names of his attacks as he uses them. He also believes that naming a weapon is essential, as it makes the weapon less of a tool and more of a part of the user. It's silly, yes, but his character really does lead some hilarious moments. He's also great in battle too, being one of my best units in every playthrough I've done of the game, with key traits like high dodge rates and high crit percentage, an overall big part of why I enjoyed Awakening.
Down, Sword Hand!
Professor Layton, a series full of mystery, intrigue, emotion, and moments that are beyond absurd. Yeah, it's pretty easy to see why people who have played these games love them so much. For me, one of the biggest reasons why I like Professor Layton is its characters. Layton's great, Luke's great, Inspector Chelmey's great. Pretty much the entire main cast consists of enjoyable characters, with some exceptions here and there. But to find our next candidate, we need to look towards the franchise's antagonists, which are all pretty great too. Though if you guys remember which Professor Layton game I played before, you can already guess which character I'm picking. It's the main antagonist of Professor Layton the Unwound Future, Clive. If you ever needed a perfect example of the tragic villain archetype, then look no further than this majestic mastermind. Under the identity of future Luke for majority of the game, Clive was the one who sent Layton the letter that jumpstarted his adventure, and he spends most of the game with Layton and Luke as they try to solve the mystery behind the tyrannical future Layton. But once Layton figures out that future London is merely an underground replica of London, Clive is forced to reveal his true identity and how he was in cahoots with future Layton, who was actually Dimitri Allen, the game's secondary antagonist. It's then that Clive reveals his true plan of using the scientists that Dimitri captured to create a giant mobile fortress, and intends on using the fortress to destroy the actual London. As you can tell from this information I just gave you, Clive is a very resourceful character, being able to use what's around him to his advantage. He's also quite cunning and clever, as he managed to hide his true intentions to even Dimitri until the last second, something I find to be quite impressive. But at the same time, those who knew Clive before his turn to evil say he was once a sweet, gentle boy who really cared a lot for his family and friends. So that begs the question, what caused him to change? Well, I refer to him as a tragic villain for a reason. Prior to the events of Unwound Future, Clive lived with his parents in an apartment in London, the same apartment building where Dimitri was working on his time machine with Bill, Hawks, and Claire. However, Clive was on his way home when Bill ran a test on the machine behind Dimitri's back, leading to some disastrous results. The explosion killed Clive's parents, leaving Clive both heartbroken and as an orphan. After growing up under the care of Miss Constance Dove, Clive became a reporter so he can access the newspaper archives and find out what caused his parents' death. It was then that he found out about the time machine experiment, and how Bill had made enough money from the test that he managed to become the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Blinded by his lust for revenge, he made a deal with Dimitri, who also sought revenge on Bill for the destruction of his lifelong work, to go ahead with their plan. But probably one of the best parts of Clive is how he redeems himself from all this at the end. After Layton and his team saved Clive from the fortress as it began to fall apart, Clive realizes what he had done and his lust for revenge fades away. As Bill has him arrested, Clive tells Layton that he's sorry for what he did and intends on making up for his crimes when he's finally let out. It's not every day we get characters, let alone villains, who will learn from their mistakes and try their hardest to atone for what they did. Though the ending is a little bittersweet, especially since Bill Hawks simply refers to Clive as a mere criminal, which he considers the scum of the earth, despite the fact that he was the reason this all happened. At least Inspector Chelmey subtly acknowledges Bill for what he actually is. We've looked at some pretty impressive characters thus far, but now we're pulling out the big guns. The following 3 characters aren't just my top 3 favorite video game characters, but all 3 of them are some of my favorite characters in all of fiction. So to start off the top 3, it's time to look towards the Tekken series. And you can already guess who I'm picking. Ladies and gentlemen, here we have the poster boy of the Tekken franchise, Jin Kazama. Now, among the entirety of the Tekken cast, Jin has stood out for me from day one. Yes, even more so than characters like King, Yoshimitsu, and, well, Paul Phoenix. And one of the reasons that Jin does so is his role in Tekken's story. Jin is the son of previous Tekken characters Jun Kazama and Kazuya Mishima, and begins training with his grandfather Heihachi Mishima in order to avenge his mother's death at the hands of the ancient deity Ogre. However, after defeating Ogre, Heihachi betrays him in an attempt to take the devil gene within Jin. Sickened by Heihachi's inhuman nature, Jin tries to disconnect himself from the Mishima family, entering conflict with Heihachi and his father Kazuya, until winning power over the family's company, the Mishima Zaibatsu, at the end of Tekken 5. With this much power under his wing, Jin commences a full-scale war against all the world's nations, leading to the events of Tekken 6. While many believe that the Devil Gene has gotten the better of Jin and converted him to a villain, in actuality, Jin is trying to throw the world into enough disarray so that he can awaken Azazel, the supposed source of the Devil Gene, and destroy it in order to save the world from the threat of the Devil Gene. Okay, yeah, it wasn't the clearest plan, but in the long run, Jin was doing it for the greater good, even though he knew he was probably going to die fighting Azazel. That alone makes him a great character to me, but I haven't even mentioned his personality or gameplay. Personality-wise, Jin is relatively stoic and likes to keep to himself, but in actuality, he's only scared of what the Devil Gene will do to him if he tries to attach himself too much to those he cares about, hence his attitude. Also, as mentioned before, he has a bitter hatred for the Mishima family, as seen in Tekken 4 where he wanted to not only kill his father and grandfather, but also himself before he had any children so he can end the Mishima curse. Thankfully, he's changed his mind on that plan since. It's this take on the tragic hero archetype that really helps make him interesting to me, alongside his playstyle. When introduced in Tekken 3, Jin's fighting style was a fusion of the style of his parents, but in an attempt to rid himself of this connection to the Mishima family line, he adopted his own style of karate in Tekken 4. Whether fighting like his parents or in his own fashion, I found him a blast to use no matter what. Jin as a whole is a tragic but awesome character, and it's pretty easy to see why he stands out as one of my favorites. I just can't wait for the console version of Tekken 7 to come out so we can find out how Jin's story shall conclude. I bet a lot of you saw this one coming from a mile away. Yeah, it was pretty evident that Zero was going to be on this list. I mean, it's blatantly obvious. What, do I have to point arrows at it or something? Whatever. So let's get to the main point of this segment. I freaking love Zero. Seriously, when it comes to protagonists in the Mega Man series, Zero's easily one of the best, if not the best. And I know that the Quarter guys spent a long time talking about why he's awesome, so I'll try my hardest not to sound like a broken record. The first thing I like so much about Zero is his gameplay. I mean, it's fun enough already to shoot everything up with the Mega Buster, but it gets even better the moment Zero activates his Z-Saber. Honestly, he pretty much turns the game into a side-scrolling hack and slash, and it is glorious! But alongside his Z-Saber, Zero can use other weapons, as shown in the Zero series, all of which he's effective with. He really is a blast to use, which is probably one of the main reasons X4 and the Zero games are my favorite Mega Man titles. But another great part of Zero is his personality and backstory. As it turns out, Zero was the original Maverick and the last creation of Dr. Wowie. But after an encounter with the Maverick Hunter Sigma, Zero was relieved of the Maverick virus and it transferred over to Sigma. It was then that Zero joined as a Maverick Hunter and ended up becoming X's comrade, leading to the events of the X series. As for his personality, Zero is one of those classic, cold and emotionless on the outside, really cares for others on the inside, sort of characters. But it really does work in Zero's case as he's, well, a robot. But at the same time, he's almost always able to keep his cool in tough situations, and can usually find a backup plan no matter what an enemy does, which I find really impressive. But it's in the Zero series where his character really starts to shine even more. Having been reactivated after 100 years of being in stasis, Zero's not 100% familiar with the world around him, and also begins doubting his ability to win his battles when he's pitted against the threats of Neo Arcadia. But nevertheless, he's able to trudge through enemies like a replica of his old comrade, a corrupt rebel leader, a super weapon created from his original body, and most notably, Dr. Vile, the biggest threat Zero's ever gone against. Speaking of which, there's one final trait about Zero's character that I must mention: his willingness for self-sacrifice. There have been 3 times that Zero's had his life taken for the sake of others. The first time was in the original Mega Man X, where Zero self-destructed in order to destroy Vile's battle armor, giving X a chance to fight off Vile. He was rebuilt in X2, but then had his life taken again in X5 fighting off Sigma, while also taking Sigma down with him. But most nobly of all was in Zero 4, where, despite knowing that there would be no chance of revival if he died from this, Zero stays on the falling weapon Ragnarok in order to destroy Dr. Vile and save all of humanity. And he succeeds at doing so, but his life is lost in the process. Permanently. A truly honorable sacrifice. Honestly, there's a lot to love about this character. He's an honorable hero, he's fun to play as, he's a really likable character, not to mention his design is pretty cool, and just in general, he's a fantastic character from an awesome series. So you may have noticed there's been no Final Fantasy characters on the list as of now. And you'd think that with a character-heavy franchise like this being my favorite and all, there would be a Final Fantasy character among my favorites. Well, you're totally right. My number 1 rep is in fact a character from the Final Fantasy series. However, it may not be who you're expecting. But let's stop beating around the bush. My favorite video game character is none other than Tifa Lockhart. Where do I begin? Honestly, where do I start on why Tifa from the ever-so-popular Final Fantasy VII is my favorite video game character? Well, let's just start by addressing the elephant in the room, her design. Yeah, I know a lot of people nowadays only see her as a blatant fan service character because of her design, but Square Enix only gave her this simplistic design due to system limitations. And believe me when I say there's a lot more to her than just the supposed eye candy. Though, to be fair, I do find Tifa pretty attractive, but that's just a minor detail. Now let's talk about her battle capabilities. Tifa is the game's equivalent of the Monk class, and as many of you know, I like the Monk class. Her HP growth may be lower than most of Final Fantasy VII's cast, but her strength growth is absolutely insane. Seriously, with the right equipment, Tifa will be able to give off powerful punches that even Captain Falcon would be impressed by. There's a reason Tifa is considered almost a necessity for speedrunners of Final Fantasy VII. This power also carries over into Dissidia Duodecim Final Fantasy, in which Tifa appears as a playable character. She's heavily a melee fighter, but also has the ability to use feints and give her a chance to unleash a surprise attack on her opponents. This mechanic alone turns Tifa from a mere head-on combat kind of fighter into one that requires a bit more strategy, which makes her that much more fun to use. Not to mention, her EX burst, while a little tricky to pull off perfectly, is pretty cool to watch. But while Tifa's design and battle capabilities are both fantastic, the best part about Tifa for me is her personality and her role in the story. Despite her outward appearance making her look like a tough character, she's actually quite a sweetheart and is really empathetic. She often serves as an emotional crutch for her friends and will protect those in need both physically and emotionally. Despite this, she's also relatively shy with her own feelings, and when she does express them, she usually struggles a bit to do so. It definitely brings more of a dynamic side to her character, which I really like. That being said, she's great at keeping the team optimistic, even in what seems to be the lowest of times, something that I find really admirable. Actually, as a whole, Tifa's a very mother-like figure in how she acts, and she really stands out among Final Fantasy VII's roster because of that. There's also plays into her role in the story, where she's a member of the freedom-fighting organization Avalanche. She originally joined to get revenge for the destruction of her hometown, the same town that Sephiroth's famous for destroying, but throughout her time of being part of Avalanche, she began to mature as a person, and her motivation became for the greater good, not just for herself. She was also a childhood friend of Cloud, a plot point that plays into the story when Cloud joins Avalanche's cause. As you can guess, yes, Tifa is the love interest character of the game, which actually leads to one of my favorite parts of Tifa as a character. She's one of the few examples I've seen of a love interest done right. You see, Tifa may be Cloud's love interest in the game, but she's not a typical one. That's because she doesn't have to rely on Cloud at all. Yes, there are some occasions where she may need his help, but she's still able to hold out on her own, and at times, she ends up having to help him. In other words, Tifa remains the same character whether she's with Cloud or by herself, a trait that I don't see all that often. In the case for a lot of love interests, they're only at their best with their significant others, and in some cases, their only good characterization comes out in these situations. Heck, that's even present in Final Fantasy VII with the game's other definitive female lead, Aerith. Her best moments, or for some her only good moments, are when she's with Cloud. On her own, there's not much to her. This isn't the case with Tifa, and that's a sign of a well-written character, let alone a well-written love interest. And that is one of the many reasons why Tifa Lockhart is not just my favorite character in video games, but my favorite character in fiction as a whole. Her design is great, her abilities in gameplay are great, her personality is great, her role in the story is great, and above all, she's just as good of a character without her significant other as she is with him. I'm the One-Winged Angel, and let's hope that Square Enix keeps the traits that make Tifa so great in the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Hey everyone, sorry that it took so long to get this list out. School was taking up a majority of my time, and then my laptop got hit with a malware that forced me to rewrite the script. But nevertheless, I hope to get the next list done much sooner. In the meantime, if you like what you saw, feel free to click on that subscribe button so that you can see my work whenever it comes out. And if you want to watch more countdowns from me, click on the annotation on the screen, which will take you to a playlist of my other countdowns. And if you want to see what crazy things I've been up to, or maybe even some updates, feel free to follow me on Twitter. I'm the One-Winged Angel, and thanks for watching.